And the thought in my head is, if I ever survive this experience, I probably will be blinded by the brilliance of the light ahead of me. And I merged. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you there are no words in any language to describe the joy, the beauty, the glory of merging from darkness. And I'm exhilarated. And I have become a part of the light. And having become a part of the light, for some reason I now know that I am also an active part of love. And the thought in my head is, how does one get around in this environment? And no sooner I say that, I'm being drawn very swiftly to a building with phenomenal pillars. Hello and welcome. I am Norma. I have to tell you that it took 20 years of my life, living in 3 continents, 8 spiritual teachers, 2 marriages, 5 children. And if you count the other 5 that I brought into my life, 10 children. For me to understand the meaning of the words, I am normal. In other words, it took 20 years after my near-death experience for me to be able to answer the question that kept recurring in my mind. Who are you? You see, it was a cold December day. We lived in London at the time. And I had been feeling unwell for about a month. And of course, I had been visiting my doctor. But see, since the doctors had determined that I could not have any more children, I had 1 child, they really believed their diagnosis. So I'm sick, and nobody runs a pregnancy test. So I'm off work for a month, feeling very debilitated, and it's Monday morning, and I have to return to work. So I drag myself out of bed, and I make it into work. And all day, I'm experiencing pain. At about 4 o'clock, I look at the clock, and it occurs to me that what I'm having is labor pains. So I ask to be allowed to leave, and I make it to the elevator. And I want you to pay attention to this very first cue. It's important. I made it to the elevator, stepped into the elevator. The only other person in the elevator at the time was a Hindu woman dressed in a sari, beautiful dot on the top of her head, and I collapsed. And she was a very smart person because you see, the hospital was about 2 blocks down the road. So instead of calling 911, she hailed a cab, and with assistance, they got me into the cab, drove me to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, in the midst of my unconsciousness, I heard the word, get a stretcher. I don't do doctors' stretchers in our hospitals very well. So I kind of opened my eyes and I said, no stretcher. So between the 2 of them, they walked me into the emergency room where I collapsed now, for real. And doctors are running back and forth, and they say to her, this Hindu woman, what is her name? And she says, I don't know. Do you know where she lives, where she works? Do you know anything about her? Let's find her handbag. Well, the driver in the chaos drove off with my handbag. He brought it back the next day. So nobody knows who I am, and I've got this emergency, and the doctors are now saying that I've got a dead baby inside of me for over a month that has poisoned my system, and I need surgery. This little Hindu woman stayed the night. She never left that emergency room, prayed, because they had to call the cops in order to find who I was. And by the time they found my husband, I had already been operated on, crossed over to the other side, and come back. And Selena, God bless her soul, was still sitting there praying to what she called her God. Now tell me, she was Hindu, she wasn't Christian. Her prayers must have been heard. I came back. So let me tell you now the experience I have. The last feeling that I had before I collapsed was excruciating pain. And the next thing I know is I'm conscious, but I'm in a strange place. I'm on the ceiling and I'm looking down. And I'm looking down at the formation of the staff about to perform an operation. And I'm thinking, now you have to understand this was 50 years ago. I am thinking, what is wrong with them? The pain is gone. They don't need to do this operation. Okay. So I'm on the ceiling and I'm looking down, and the formation is very impressive. And I watch the instruments and I go, wait a minute, they don't need to perform this operation. How do I get off the ceiling so I could tell them this? And I have to tell you, it is quite true. Our thoughts translate into energy, it translates into language. So immediately I had the thought, I'm on the ground and I'm in the face of the surgeon and I'm going, hello, this is me. You don't need to perform this operation. I need an answer to the two bodies. How could there be a body on that table and I am here? But he couldn't see me. He couldn't recognize me. So something tells me, well, women are more intuitive. So let's try the nurses. So I'm running from one nurse to the other, trying to get their attention, but to no avail. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with these people? They must all have gone blind. And then I flatlined. I watched the graph as I flatlined, and all hell broke loose in that room. And I'm thinking, something's wrong with these people. Now the equipment is malfunctioning. You see, nowhere in my brain was a thought that I had died. But when they picked up the instruments to administer the wave of electricity to shock me back, being in the spirit, I could see the corona of energy. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not dead. But if they apply that amount of electricity to my body, I will be dead. I am out of here. And with that thought, I found myself straight through the ceiling into a very dark tunnel. Now, when I tell you a dark tunnel, I don't think I've ever experienced darkness as I experienced it then. The darkness was almost deep into the soul. And traveling through this tunnel at a very, very high speed. And suddenly there's a speck of light that begins to oscillate. Well, if you're in a very dark space and a speck of light comes up, obviously your eyes will be drawn to it. So my eyes are drawn to this oscillating scope of light. And then I come around a corner and I could see this amazing volume of white light. And the thought in my head is, if I ever survive this experience, I probably will be blinded by the brilliance of the light ahead of me. And I merged. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, there are no words in any language to describe the joy, the beauty, the glory of merging from darkness into light. And I'm exhilarated. And I have become a part of the light. And having become a part of the light, for some reason, I now know that I am also an active part of love. And the thought in my head is, how does one get around in this environment? And no sooner I say that, I'm being drawn very swiftly to a building with phenomenal pillars. Reminds you of the Roman buildings that you see in pictures. And in those days, a television was this big with a screen. It was a television screen that was about the width of the wall behind you. Huge television screen lit up. And it began to scroll. And in scrolling, it had 3 columns. The first column was my life as I had planned it. Nowhere on earth had I ever read that. Don't think they had books on that in those days. But I knew in my spirit that was my life as I had planned it. The middle column represented the experiences that had come to me during my life, allow me to live what I had planned. And my eyes going from here to here. Oh, I'm in laugh. It's funny. The review about that.
Next station.
Sorry about that. So now I'm in laughter, you see, because I can see quite clearly, it's plain English, what I had, the plan I had designed. And now I'm looking at the conditions that came to me and what I did with them. And I'm standing there thinking, I must have been very stupid. What was wrong with me? Because you see, someone had taught me how to pray. Because both of my grandfathers had churches. So I grew up in the church. But looking from one to the other, I discovered that this gift that had been given to me about prayer, I had used it to get what I wanted here on earth. And 90% of the things that I was praying for was counterproductive to what I had planned. So, can you understand why I'm standing there feeling stupid? Because when the conditions came to me so that I can have the experiences to manifest what's on the left, I got on my knees and I said, please, 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 God, take it away. It's too difficult. And then I looked at the final column on the right, and that was amusing as well. Because you see, it looked as though someone had created a stamp that said, objective not accomplished. Objective not accomplished. And I'm standing there going, well, I must have been really stupid. All of this to the backdrop of humor, you see. It's humor to me. It's funny to me that I called myself intelligent when I was on Earth. But now that I was doing this review, I realized that I was in my own way. So the review comes to an end, and I voice the question. I have questions. I said, first of all, it's not fair that I lived a life where I wasn't given all the information and I'm expected to be judged by it. And I asked the question, but who taught me to pray anyway? Prayer has two distinct parts. One is the asking and the other is the listening. They taught me how to pray. They didn't teach me anything about meditation. So how on earth was I supposed to be able to hear the answers? And as soon as I said that, the screen began to scroll again. Only this time, they dropped 7 lifetimes in there. And now I can look at the balance and understanding began to emerge. For example, one of the reasons why the doctors felt I would never have any children, I had had a baby, and that baby was born. It lived 3 hours, and then it died, and I could not get over it. Even in the state that I was in, I was still in grief over this baby that died full birth, and I was in grief. Now, when I look at the input of the 7 lifetimes, I discovered that my son, whose name we had given as Michael, and I had walked for 3 lifetimes, and he was trying to teach me the understanding of what love is. And he didn't manage to do it in 3 lifetimes. So he made a plan that he will come to me in this lifetime to be able to sensitize our energies and merge our energies by me carrying him for 9 months. And then he would leave and go back to the afterworld and become my guiding angel. So he can direct the process of teaching me love from the other side. And now I'm like, oh, that was a blessing. I just never understood it. The question of It's unfair for me to live one lifetime with not enough information. How can I be judged? And now I can see 7 lifetimes. I could see my marriage at that time was kind of rocky and under rocks. And I could see why it meant that I could not walk away and divorce at that time because we had karma between us. And for 3 lifetimes, we had both run away from balancing the karma. And in this lifetime, it was determined that there was a given amount of years that we had to spend together so the karmic ties could be broke. In the review, I saw my parents and the roles that they had in my life before this lifetime and why it is that we got connected in this lifetime. So by dropping the 7 lifetimes in, I could see the correlation between why there was a continuity between many of the relationships that I had experienced, including some relationships that were not so positive. So when that review came to an end, I thought, well, what next? Where do I go from here? And I was drawn to the edge of a river. When I was a child, we sang the hymn, Yes, we will gather by the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river. It flows from the throne of God. Yes, there is a river. And on the other side of the river were hundreds of people whom I seemed to know. I could feel the love that they were radiating towards me. But there were only a few faces I recognized because those were the ones that had been part of my life, the life I had just left. But I could feel the love that emanated from each and every one of us. And my aunt, with whom I had a very special relationship, stepped into the river and began to clear the moss. So she's clearing the moss, and I'm wading in the river towards her, and she stops and she goes, I'm sorry, you cannot be allowed to cross now. And I said, why? And she says, because we're sending you back with a message. And the message says, there is more to life than meets the eye. And I said, well, why do I have to take the message? Don't you know there are millions of people back there? You can give one of them the message. I don't need to go back. And she says, well, I'm sorry. You can't stay. You have to return. And with those words, I found myself falling at this amazing speed. And when I hit the body, I had moved from ecstasy into pain. Despite the fact that I was highly sedated, when I hit that body, I felt pain. Now I'm back. And there was a little stint in ICU. And then they moved me into a ward which was close to the nurse's station. And there are 2 nurses, this is Monday, and they're talking about the fact that they both belong to the same church. And one was able to go to church on Sunday and the other wasn't. So they're sharing, the one is sharing what the sermon was and it had to do with hell. And I want to scream at them, that's not true. Where in the world did you get that? Where did the pastor who told you this? And suddenly I stop and I go, wait a minute. 24 hours ago, I believed that. What happened to me that I no longer believe it? The change, the paradigm shift was instant. I'm looking at the doctors and the nurses and I'm going, wow, they're running around trying to save the lives of their patients, but many of them are truly ignorant of the medical problems that they have themselves because I can see their auric field and I can see the conditions that have begun to arise inside of the field. I discovered that my senses have been highly activated. And the next 9 days is not, they kept me in the hospital for 9 days, was not a very happy one. I'm watching the, and then of course there was this particular nurse when she came to her station, she would turn music on. And whoa la la. Now I'm watching every note tied to a color. Every color is tied to a number. Every number is tied to a mathematical figure. And I am just mesmerized. Is that the whole world has changed. In the meantime, my rescuer, the Hindu lady, she came every day to the hospital to see me at lunchtime. But I was in no mood to greet visitors, you see, because the very first chance I had of speaking with the doctor who brought me back, I said to him, "But didn't you have patients to take care of? There's lots of people here want to live. I didn't want to live. Why'd you bring me back?" And the nurse said to me, "If you had been here to see three doctors and their efforts to bring you back, you absorbed a lot of electricity." And I said, "Oh, yes, I saw that. And I was not in agreement with it at all." But no one could hear my objections. So now the journey begins living in a world where you can't, I was very clear, I can't talk about this. Because if I do, they will label me crazy. You have to understand, 50 years ago, there were no books. There were no pamphlets. Nobody was talking about this. I swore I was the only person in the world that had had this experience. I didn't even have a name for it. And so I shut my mouth for 15 years. I was married to a man. We got divorced, and he did not know that I had had a near death experience. He knew that I had flatlined, but I didn't share it with anyone until my mother was getting ready to pass, and she was the first person I shared the experience with, and then I held on to it for another 15 years. How did it change my life? So, for the first 3 years, I was severely depressed, and I took time to organize my suicide. I was very thorough, but each time it failed. The third time, I was so mad at this truck driver, you see, because I had spent time studying his journey. He parked his truck in the same place every night, and he pulled it out every morning. And I had even figured out in terms of mathematics how long it would take him to get to 60 miles an hour. And so I positioned myself in that space and waited, and as he approached, I stepped into the roadway. And to this day, I will never understand how he stopped that truck. He stopped that truck within an inch of me. And I'm shaking my hands at this man, and people are assuming it's because I'm angry because he nearly killed me, but I'm shaking my hands at him, going, "What in the world is wrong with you? I want to die." And at the end of the third attempt, the Spirit said to me in a meditation, "Even if you attempted suicide, we'll send you back." So I opened my eyes from the meditation and determined, well, this would be a futile effort. I've got to think of something else. And the thought occurred to me, please, can I come back? Can I visit, if only for one night? If only for 1 hour. I want to be able to feel that exhilarating experience of light. I want to be able to drink it in and experience it. And I began a journey of intention. My intention was I needed to return. I mean, I accepted they were not going to keep me, but at least I wanted to experience it. What did that take? What that took was the very first spiritual teacher was an Anglican priest who understood the meaning of the word sacredness. And he had an obsession with angels. He believed in them, but he never could see them. Well, I came up with my sight wide open and I can see angels, you see. And I started volunteering in the church office. And he had a way at lunchtime, he would come into the sanctuary and he would light a candle and he would pray. And I would kind of follow him in and sit in the back because I would see the angels come in when he lights the candle. Do you know when you light a candle, angels appear? Only this particular day, he lit 3 candles and an archangel appeared. And I literally jumped up and I went, "Oh!" And he said, "My child, what are you looking at?" And I said, "It's an angel." "No, it's bigger than an angel. It's an archangel." And that began a connection between us, you see. And he began to encourage me with meditation. He encouraged me to look at some of the ancient chanting practices because he was convinced that if I can do some chanting and if I can discipline myself, I may be able to see more. So he was my very first spiritual teacher. When that came to an end, the next spiritual teacher was a couple. Hmm. He was 90 and she was 83. And at this time, we had now returned to my home country in Guyana, South America. And I am now confused. Who am I? I'm walking around with this sight. There are times I can say to people, I can't tell them I'm seeing what I'm seeing, but I would say, you need to go see a doctor. And when you go see a doctor, ask him to check your chest or ask him to check, your liver. And I'm wondering, where does this come from? I don't understand. Who am I? I'm not the same person I was before this experience. And so I took this question to this 90-year-old man whom we called a wisdom keeper on the planet. And he said to me, I need to take you to my wife. I can't answer that question. I'll take you to my wife. Now, she was 83, and she was also a wisdom keeper. And he took me to his wife, and she said, go on home, and on Saturday, I'll come to your house, and we'll talk about this some more. Now, where I come from, elders don't come to your house, you go to theirs. So I'm feeling this is an honor. Well, she showed up on Saturday morning with 11 other women, elderly women. And when they came, they brought all these boxes with them. I'm mystified. And she gets there and she says to my husband, my then husband, won't you show me around your home? Now you have to understand, these are village people. They never left their village. We had no television. They never really went down to the town for that matter. Simple people. And so he showed them around the home. And when we got back to the living room, she congratulated him. She said, you created a beautiful home for your family. And then she snapped her finger. And when she snapped her finger, these 12 women went into action. They sprang into action and began to take the curtains down, all the artifacts on the wall. And I had a wall with crystals, you see, because having had the near death experience, I was now obsessed with crystals. So I had collected this large collection of crystals, and I had it on the wall, 3 glass rows, and we had lights trained on them. And of course, you can imagine kids weren't allowed to even go over in that direction. And they very calmly took the whole collection down, wrapped it in newspaper, put in these boxes, put them on the floor. Then they pulled the furniture to the center of the room and asked if I would bring some sheets. And they covered it up. And I'm thinking, well, are we moving? So, not wanting to insult an elder, we offered to help. And she says, no, 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 I want you to observe. This is why I brought these women. And they moved through the entire house and did the same to every room. Except when they got to the room that we call that was the room that we call the office. And of course, on the walls were all the accolades we had acquired in England, decorating the walls. Well, she didn't treat those with too much respect. She had those taken off the walls and put on the floor. And when they were finished dismantling the home, she says, now let's re-walk through your home. You ask me, who am I? I can't answer that for you. What I can answer for you is who you are not. Let's walk through your home so I can point out to you who you're not. She says, all the stuff that you've collected is stuff. It's not a representation of who you are. It's a representation of the world's value. When we got to the office, she says, and this particularly is not who you are. This is what the world says about you, and you may or may not live up to it. But right now, you haven't started living up to it, so you don't own it. It's just a piece of paper. It's just pieces of paper. So when they were finished now, they got to the front door and they thanked us very graciously for allowing us to dismantle our home. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do now? And she says, it's entirely up to you. Now you know who you're not. From there, you probably can figure out who you are. And the journey began. The journey of self discovery began. Now, I never shared with this couple that I had a near death experience, but I suspected they knew. So I go to brother, as we call them, and I said, I have a sense that we live more than one life. Why don't we remember the lives we have lived? And he called his great granddaughter and he says, bring me a hose, bring me a glass, bring me a scissors, and bring me a one side glove, plastic glove. And she complied with his wishes. And he said, now turn the hose on, take that glass and draw me a glass of water, but I want you to hold it under the glove. Well, everything comes out the top, right? He said, so okay, now cut a hole on the finger of each of every one of the fingers on the glove. He says, don't draw me a glass of water. So I put the glass and I handed him a glass of water and he held it up and he says, absolutely pure, isn't it? Sparklingly clean, isn't it? And I said, yes. He said, now, I want you to get a handful of dirt and I want you to fill each one of these fingers and make sure you drop a pebble or two in there. So I did, and he said, now draw me a glass of water. And of course, you can imagine what the result is. The water kind of drips, drips, drips. And I ended up with a glass of dirty water. He held it up and he says, contaminated, isn't it? He said, well, that's the reason why you can't remember your lifetimes. You arrived here as a divine soul and you immediately started dumping trash on top of your soul. And you have clouded it and you have filled it with the world's trash. And this is the reason why you can't remember. So now you will have to find ways to clear it and cleanse it. He says, and I'm warning you, there is no medical doctor that can help you do that. And so that journey began of clearing and cleansing. It led to him teaching me fasting. I said to him one day, I made a mistake of saying to him, well, can you explain why it is, if there really is a God, why it is that people are still dying? Why is it that people have these medical problems? Why doesn't God do what he's supposed to do? Well, I learned very quickly there's some questions you don't ask elders. And he says, you got a lot of questions, don't you? And I said, yes. And he says, well, I'm going to require of you 40 days of fasting. And I said, are you crazy? You trying to kill me? I've got a husband. I've got a job. I've got 4 children. I can't do that. He says, that's not my problem. That's your problem to figure out how you will. But I want 40 days of fasting from you. And this is how you will fast. You start in the morning with a little round bread that you will bake yourself without yeast, which is known here as pita bread. And then you will cut it in 2 halves. And you will make a cup of herbal tea and half of if you think of a regular pita bread, and you'll have that before the sun comes up. And you will pray and you will meditate and you will drink water all day until the sun goes down. And when the sun goes down, you are going to gather vegetables, put them in a pot and put 2 cups of water in it and allow it to boil until it simmers down to 1 cup. Then you strain it. You will throw away the vegetables and you will drink the cup of broth with the other half of the pita bread. So, of course, I started doing this now, and I swear to God, I believed that I was going to die of hunger. And I'm getting smaller and smaller. And we're coming all the way down to the last week. And he shows up at my house. He says, oh, there's something I forgot to tell you. The last 7 days, I want nothing in your body. When your saliva comes up, I want you to spit it out. And now I'm convinced he's really trying to kill me. Maybe this is his way of stopping these questions. But nonetheless, he's an elder. So I followed suit. And by the time I came to the end of the 40th day, I literally dragged my skinny body over to his house. And he was in conversation with another elder, and he says, "Excuse me." And he turned to me and he says, "Oh, you're alive. How did you stay alive? You've eaten nor drunk anything in 7 days." I said, "No, I'm barely alive." He says, "Well, thank Almighty God. Now you'll understand and you'll never ask me a stupid question like, why doesn't God do what he's supposed to do? He kept you alive." Lesson learned. Give thanks for the breath. Give thanks for the dawning of the morning. Give thanks for the fact that you can put one foot in front of the other because that is God given. You didn't do it for yourself. So that taught me that lesson about not asking stupid questions of wisdom keepers. My next lesson came with silence. The next teacher required of me that I carry 4 hours of silence every day, and that lasted for 3 years. In order to do that, I had to wake at 4:30 in the morning before the kids woke up and put the first hour and a half of silence. And at lunchtime, I would take my lunch and go off anywhere where it was quiet so I could put another hour in. And then before I went to bed at night, I supplied the rest. What did I hear in all that silence? Try it. You'd be amazed. Everything that we need to function in this life, we've already got inside of us. But we love the clutter and we love the entertainment and we're not listening within. So they forced me to listen within. And then I began to realize that the solutions I'm looking for may be available in a book, but it's kind of sort of better if you pull it up from the inside. You see, when you read books, you are reminding yourself of what you already know. Because you've lived many lifetimes into old age. You've gathered a lot of information and it is sitting there, you see. So when you pick up a book, what you're doing is reminding your subconscious, hey, you need to release this information. But unless you do the clearing on the inside that is necessary, the information cannot surface. I want to stop there and ask any questions because I don't know about you. I was born asking questions and I would have had 1,000 questions just based on what I just said. Anybody has a question so far? Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hi.
I appreciate your wonderful story. But I've died myself, and my question is, when did you know you were dead?
I never acknowledged I was dead when I was dead because you see, I was processing very clearly. There was nothing unclear. I was very sure about things. It never occurred to me that I was dead until I came out of it and they told me I died. As a matter of fact, for about 3 minutes, I should be brain dead. But I never acknowledged it because I was processing. Anybody else with a question? It's a hand over here.
I was curious when the female elders came into your house and they totally dismantled it, and your husband was there. How, how did you react
I was in shock.
after that, though? What was your process?
Oh, well, after that, now I had to really start looking for the answer to who am I? Because if you're telling me that, you know how we measure ourselves by the quality of the home we're in and how good we are at keeping that home, it dawned on me that all of my measurements and my had to do with worldly things. It had nothing to do with spirituality. And the first place it took me to was what is my birthright? I suddenly discovered, well, when I came, I had to, I know that I came with a plan, but what was my birthright? And that led me to acknowledging that my birthright is love. And while I'm here, for all of us, our journey has to do with removing the clutter, ensuring we don't pile more clutter on, so we can be very clear about our birthright. It is your birthright to be at peace, to love and be loved, to wonder at the beauty of nature, to understand the spiritual things of life. That's your birthright. So it led me to discover that I had a birthright and what that represented, and to understand that I should not measure myself. Today, my measurement of who I am is in the 5 children that I have now given to the world. I birthed them into the world. I raised them with the consciousness level that got turned on very early in my life. And when I look at them now, I feel that my value and my worth in life is these amazing human beings that I have given to them. Does that answer your question? Oh, there's one over here, too.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
You mentioned earlier about the past lives and why you asked that question. How come we don't remember any of these lives? And because of the clutter and all, the that that layers everything, so you don't, have any recognition of it. But what if you do remember? Because I've had experiences where I've had lots of dreams that I feel are about past lives of mine, and I've written a lot of them down, and then I've met people in my life that I think are connected with those lives pieces of trying to come together about that. Do you think it's something important to focus on these lives you might remember and maybe do some past life regression, and that would
Thank you
maybe
for
make
that
it.
question.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much for that question.
You're welcome.
Your memory has to do with what you wrote in your plan. When you wrote the plan on the other side, you determined that you were going to examine X amount of lifetimes to be of assistance to you in this life. If you didn't write it in the plan, trust me, leave it alone. I have met so many people who are princesses in a last life, and they can't get their act together because nobody's treating them like a princess today. I've met so many Einsteins. You see what I'm saying? If it is designated that it is part of your life path, you will know it and you will go in search of it. But if you don't feel an urge to do that, leave it alone because it can get in the way. As a matter of fact, too many people put a hold on their life or stop their lives, stop growing forward because they're so busy looking. The past is the past. There is nothing we can do. Change it. The present is the gift. That is why it is called the gift. And the present informs the future. So, where should your focus be? In the present, now, so you can inform the future that is looming up. But there are people who have written that into their program. When I get there, there are 3 past lives that I will need to understand so I can move on. And then it's perfectly natural and normal for you to do that. But just to go in search of it just for information, I don't think we understand. One of the things I saw at the record is that we need to stop talking about past lives. There's no such thing as past life. We live, ladies and gentlemen, we live one life, and it is eternal. We never die. What we're talking about when you say past lives is really a page in the book of your life. You see what I'm saying? And you've lived 65 past lives so far. That's 65 pages in your book. It's just a page. You turn it over. You start writing on the next page. Can you feel that? Does that answer your question? You see, I always had questions from age 9. And I believe that is why when I had the near death experience, it took me to the record. It took me about 20 years before I could recognize that they had taken me to the Akashic record. Buddhist tradition, they know about it. But we created this nice fancy heaven that is very limited. And that's what we teach in the Christian religion. Okay. There was a hand over here.
Thank you. You're a fabulous speaker.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. What if we don't want to come back again to do another life here on Earth? Are there options?
Sweetheart, let me tell you, the only options we have is when we are on Earth. When we are on Earth, we are giving that limiting opportunity to be able to do it our way. You get into spirit, it's spirit's way. When you merge back into spirit, you are a piece of this phenomenal thing called the universe. And they can't allow people to run around doing what they would like to do because you really would mess up the universe. See what I'm saying? So this is why it is designated that when you are in a physical body, you're allowed options. Now, it's funny you ask that question because on the way here, the person who brought me here, for some reason, I was explaining that I did not want to come back for this lifetime. And when the time came, and I saw that in the record. When the time came, I was like, no, I don't want to. It's too hard. I don't want to do it. And several guides tried to encourage me, and I was still adamant until this one particular guide who ended up playing an incredible role in my life, and we'll talk about that in a minute. He stepped forward and he took me to a throne room, and there was this very beautiful ornate chair. And he said to me, sit in the chair. And I did. And I said, oh, this is the most comfortable chair I've ever sat in. And he said, it's yours. But until you make that next visit, you will not have the authority to sit in it. And that is what made me make the decision. You see, it's better if we make the decision, because if we don't make the decision, they're going to shove us into the body anyway. Has to be done.
One thing that we have is an internet question. So if you wouldn't mind, Chuck's going to tell you about it. I'm going to give him the mic and then he can do that.
Hi, thank you. This is from Barbara. How do we get back to the life we originally planned? Is there a way to do that even if we aren't someone who has an NDE?
Okay. Thank you for that question. It's a very powerful question. You have to clear the bases. I don't know how many of you in here may have had a Christian background, but if you did, you would know that Christ said you cannot put new wine into old skins. And oh God, I'm still waiting for a pastor to explain that spiritually. You've got to clear the bases. We all know we have chakras, don't we? And they get cluttered. We have to push the vibration higher. Part of my job on the planet right now is to help people raise their vibration. As a coach, as a life coach, I don't teach anybody to be a healer. I don't teach you no method on how to heal. I don't teach you whether you should work with music or you should work with whatever, Reiki or whatever. My job, and there are many, many teachers like this, is to raise the vibration. Because as the vibration raises, there's oscillation taking place, and that oscillation is going to break up everything you have in your chakras and let them go. So the answer to that question is lifting the vibration higher, pursuing spiritual discipline. You see, a lot of people have near death experiences, and then the senses begin to open up. Yes, I've done automatic writing. Yes. See, I was too focused on going back. I didn't pay too much attention to all this stuff that started rising. But too many of us have an NDE experience. We come back and we discover we can read for people, and now we determine this is my journey in life. I'm going to spend the rest of my life reading for people. And there was a time at first when I started doing that, and then I stopped. I stopped. So it's about clearing space. I think one way of explaining it to you, in this room, I'm sure all the outlets are 120, aren't they? What do you think would happen if I came into this room with a piece of equipment with 240 volts and I plug it into that wall? What would happen? Explosion. We are trying to read our way without following the discipline and doing the work into raising our vibration to 240 volts. But we don't want to do the work, you see, so that we can accomplish spiritual growth and passage in direction. I say if you raise the vibration, then you will discover very quickly what you came here to do, and nobody will have to teach you how to do it because you've already done it many lifetimes before. I hope that answers the question. Clear the vibrations, get rid of the clutter, get disciplined. And I have to say this. One of the things that Spirit says to me that this really, really is annoying to them. All these people want to know what their life purpose is. They want to grow spiritually. Will you please ask them to dump the trash in their bodies every day? Because it's really, really hard for us to kind of work with you if you're not throwing the trash out. And they said to me, many of these people would not live in a house with trash in the kitchen, but they expect us to come journey with them. So I say, if you're serious about spirituality, begin with having at least 2 bowel movements a day. Be a good host and provide clear space. And then you begin the work of breaking down the emotions, breaking down whatever else happens to be sitting there. And as soon as you begin to become a clear channel, everything you need to know will be told to you. One more question before I go on. Who's got the next question? Oh, well, it has to be 2 because she has one and there's one over here. I can't hear you.
You have to do something. What in the world do we do on the other side?
Work.
That makes me happy.
Oh, serious work. I just had, of course, in all this training and all this study and so on, I got to know who my guides are and got very comfortable with my main guide. Incidentally, we all have guides. We have a main guide who's in charge of them all. We have guides who are there for our protection. And we have guides who are called wayshores. Wayshores are fascinating to watch because when you are going through tragedy or whatever that experience is, they fall in step with you. And their goal is to maintain your balance as you go along. You're going through what it is. They don't teach, they don't guide, they don't speak to you. They just lend the energetic support. And as soon as the other guides begin to work with you and you begin to come back to yourself, it's very interesting to watch. They back away. They never turn back. They back away. But a couple of months ago, my main guide said to me, well, it is time for me to move on. I've been with you for 300 years and I've learned much. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to have been able to learn through working with you. I'll move on and I'll be replaced by another main guide. And that has just happened. But when we're on the other side, this is why I say to people, and you have to understand, this is just my preference from the other side being wide open to me. Could you please leave those spirits alone so they could do what it is that they're assigned to do? You know, because we have people now who every simple question, they want to call their guides and ask for the answer. Guides and guards have work to do on the other side. They're working for their own spiritual growth as well. And we need to be mindful. For me, if my guides want to speak to me, they may come. And I listen. Does that answer your question? It's hard work on the other side. Sometimes we're given a whole planet. We're given a whole area that we have to manage and maintain when we're on the outside. And one of the things that has been said to me by my main guide once when I was kind of rebelling at what I was being asked to do. He says, "You wait. It'll be your turn to become a guide. And you think you got problems now. Wait when you're trying to direct them and they can't see or hear you." So it's perfectly legitimate for them to ignore you. One more question over here. Who's got the mic?
Question.
It actually declined, so I guess her answer was already given.
Okay.
Anyone else?
So
What time is it? How are you with time?
How do you see and experience your guides?
where's the question? I like to see who's asking the
How
question.
do you see and experience your guides?
How do I see and
How would
experience
I
my guide?
experience my
First of all, they basically come to me in dreams. When I was carrying my last child, it was very interesting. We just got into the United States of America with 4 children. We are still living with family and trying to get a life together. We did not even have a home of our own. And I got pregnant despite birth control. And of course, I raised my shit and I shook my fists at them. How could you let this happen? I was responsible. I went and I got birth control and I was very responsible in following the directions. How could this happen? And the answer that was given to me is, you're thinking about this and processing this with your 1/10 consciousness. We're guiding you with 9/10 conscious. Trust us. He is my youngest child. He's the one that he tells me he's going to buy me a Mercedes. I have no desire for a Mercedes, but see, he's the only American in the family. And he says, I drive all these foreign cars. He graduates in December with his master's. And that is his plan. And you know, that's fine. If you want to buy it, I'll probably drive it and then sell it because it's not my thing. But they come to me in the dream state. And when I was in rebellion of I can't be pregnant. How can I be pregnant? I was diligent. And my guide literally appeared to me as I was getting into bed one night. And he says, was an elderly man. He says, it's a boy. His name is Stephen with a P. And you better get yourself to a doctor. And he will be born on the 4th of July. And he left, and he was right. So for me, they approach me when they have something to say. Like the night my son burnt the car to smithereens by accident. And I turned over and my father was standing there sliding doors with his hands behind his back. And he says, wake up. You got a mess to clean. So I see them in my meditation. I hear their voices very clearly. And I guess if it's when it's absolutely needed, they will show up in person. But that's very rare. But I hear their voices very, very, very clear, particularly when I'm trying to make some earthly decision and I'm leaning more to the earthly part of that decision. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, so let's move now to how did I get to the other side? Now I'm doing all this stuff because my guides are indicating to me you still have blockage. You still have blockage. We did the silence. We did fasting has now become every Friday now I fast. And every year I do the 40-day fast during Lent. I'm fasting the same time that the Muslims are fasting. And yet I'm hearing there is still blockage. There is still blockage. And then I am given, by way of automatic writing, a whole process to clear others. That's the other thing about this spiritual life. The things that you want to give to others, you got to kind of open yourself and allow it to be done to you. You see what I'm saying? And so I'm working through all of this, but I'm still hearing there's more blockage. And then it became very apparent that this beautiful gift that was given to me of seeing music and experiencing it in a different way had the capacity to clear space. So now I start clearing space by myself. I would lie in meditation and I would run certain pieces of music, and I can see behind my eyelids whether it's green light or purple light. And incidentally, grace is the color purple. You see, purple light is grace. I can see when I'm filled with grace. I can see when green needs to intervene. And so I start working with myself with light. And of course, then I decide I'm going to have to try this. And that's when I said, well, I'm not a psychologist. I don't plan to go back to school to study psychology. So who in the world is going to allow me to try this on a physical person? And the guide said, take it into prison. They'll let you do it. Well, I have to tell you, getting into prison, if you haven't committed a crime, is a hard thing. Oh my God, it took a year and a half. But I took it into prisons. And of course, when you get into prison, there's people with a lot of trauma. And so I started to work with them in prison. And eventually ended up learning how to take the spiritual principles, drop it into clinical practice, and use them in that way. And here I'm here to tell you, whenever I say hundreds and hundreds of people have been cleared, people who have been cleared and who passed through that prison system would say, you're underestimating the thousands of us, because most of the time you had a class of 35 at a time. And you may work on 35 people for a year, and then they will move on. And you were in the prison for 27 years. So that's a lot of people. But you have to keep clearing until this heart chakra. You see, let me tell you what I saw the record. As soon as we send up a prayer, instantly the energy to fulfill the answer is sent to us. Instantly. But it has to enter through the heart chakra. And when the heart is cluttered with all these people we can't forgive, we won't forgive, and we're holding on to grudges, etc., it's got our heart chakra cluttering. So this energy is coming at the speed of light, and when it hits the heart, because the heart is clogged, the energy breaks up. And anybody standing on the sidelines with an open heart will receive your blessing. Can you feel that? Anybody you can't forgive, you're carrying them on your back and you carry them in your heart. And you're blocking your blessings. So figure them out real fast. And you don't have to go find them to forgive them. Just be quiet in meditation and say, I forgive you and I forgive myself. Because guess what? Whatever that experience, whether it be past life experiences or present day experiences, you drew them into your life. And I know that's hard to hear, but if some of us can see the things that we perpetuated in past lives, we would understand how blessed we are. The challenges we have today are simple compared to what we put out there. And again, I'm going to come back to Christ's words, not because I'm preaching. He said, I did not come to overturn the law. Heaven and earth may pass away, but not a jot nor a tickle of the law will be changed. I battled with that from age 9 until I met that 90-year-old man to explain that to me. Karma is real. I don't know about you, I'm a little bit lazy, so I submit to grace because you see, with the sight that I have, when I look upon someone that grace is at work on, it looks as though they're in the middle of a purple flame and the flame is burning away everything that needs to be burned away. So you put yourself on the grace, you don't have to work quite so hard to get rid of the garbage. Can you feel me? Can you feel me? And it's got nothing to do with religion. Grace just happens to be purple energy. And that energy clears, cleanses, and heals. So now let me get on to how did I get back? I'm obsessed and I'm doing all this clearing and I'm doing all this cleansing. And it occurs to me, let me see if I could possibly take someone out. And I'm working with men in prison. You know, men in prison, they get a tremendous amount, people in prison get a tremendous amount of opportunities for silence. And I even teach them how to fast in prison. Of course, the guards think they're crazy, but that's okay. And I can get them to fast, and they have a lot of time to do meditation, etc., etc. And so the very first person I took out through the realms was a prisoner, an elderly prisoner in prison who had got life and did not have any hope of leaving the prison. And I used a piece of music and I got him out. So after I got him out, now I thought, well, I'll just teach somebody the process that I use on him and they can use it on me, but it didn't work. And so I was very, very disappointed. And then I have this habit of taking in, because I've become an expert at substance abuse intervention. Very often I'll take in somebody that has got the problem. And so they have 5 children in addition to my own 5 children that that call me mom. And I have this beautiful white, blue-eyed, blonde daughter. She will tell you in a heartbeat that's my mother. And I had taken her in, you see. And it was my birthday, and she said, "Oh, I've got tickets to the Kennedy Center." And I'm thinking, my God, this child is on a budget. She's working as a waitress. She had to have saved, to raise this money to buy these tickets. So she takes me to the concert hall, and she won't tell me who is playing. Okay. So we get there, and she rushes me in, and I said, well, who are we here to listen to? She said, "You'll find out." So they dim the lights, and when they dim the lights, this rather slim white man comes on stage, no shoes on his feet. He's got socks on, a t-shirt, and a pair of jeans. And I say to Laurie, "You mean to tell me they send the piano tuner on stage just as the concert is about to begin?" And he sat in that piano and he played something called Color and Dance, and Norma went to heaven. His name is George Winston. And so we bought the George Winston CD. And on the George Winston CD is a piece of music I will be working with tomorrow with those who show up, because that's a piece of music that took me back. And I'm hoping that somebody may be clear enough to take that journey with me. And so here I am now, and I'm fascinated by the canon NDE, and I'm playing it over and over and over again. And I'm very frustrated that my girlfriend, a couple of my students have tried to take me out and never happened. And one day, one of my guides in meditation says, there is a voice that will accomplish what you need, and his name is. And I opened my eyes and I said, that's the most unspiritual person I've ever met in my life. Be careful of your judgments. Because really, he was one of those people. I rented office space from him, but all he ever talked about was money. So I assumed, I even said it to his wife. I said, you're married to the most unspiritual human being I've ever met. But you see, sometimes souls come here with disguise. They did not come to heal. They did not come to spread spirituality. They may have come for one particular assignment, and this was his assignment. And so I said, well, so far I've not been able. He says, oh no, his voice will take you there. Ask, and it shall be given unto you. Now, I don't know how to ask this gentleman this question, because he doesn't even know I have a spiritual side. So I wrote him a letter, and I said, I'd like to try an experiment using your voice. And he calls me up and he says, and so you had to write a letter? You couldn't say that to me? Okay, what time? And I said, well, Tuesday evening. And he said, fine, call my secretary, put it on her calendar. And earlier on that Tuesday morning, I got to the computer and I started typing the instructions I use to get someone out. And the voice in my head said, you're taking coals to Newcastle. Newcastle is a place in England, and all they do is coal mining. You're taking coals to Newcastle, and we don't need any talking points. So I shut down the computer. And when he walked in that evening, I said, well, first of all, I'm going to make an unusual request. I'd like to do this exercise in my bed because I know that my energy levels will fall to just whatever the barest minimum is to keep someone alive. And so I'd like to be in a place where as soon as it's over, I can be wrapped up. She says, okay. So it was me, and I have this girlfriend. We've been friends for 40 something years. And I didn't think the kids, I didn't tell the kids what I was trying to do because, they already had their fears. And so he stepped in and I got into bed and there were all these blankets piled up. And it's interesting, he didn't ask any questions. And I said, well, they had asked me to take the Canon NDE and record it 3 times with a minute of silence between the first take, 2 minutes of silence between the second take. And I did as I was told. I re-recorded it with these blank spaces in it. So when he got there, I said, I want to use your voice for a meditative exercise. And I'm going to kind of get into bed and we'll put on this tape. And then just whatever comes to you, just do that. And sometimes when I talk, my girlfriend, she describes this better than I can because she was the witness. And she said, he just simply said, Norma, I'm going to count backwards. 5, 4. By the time he said 3, I was traveling. You get out to the body. I did not go back through the tunnel. I went straight up. And I moved all the way up when I got to the 7th dimension. The most dangerous part of the journey was crossing 4. 4 is the dumping ground. Anybody telling you they're taking you to the 4th dimension, tell them to get out of your way real fast. It's a dumping ground for all the spiritual trash that we have here on the 3rd. We're no longer on the 3rd now, we're on the 5th dimension. But anyway, I went straight up to 7, and when I got to 7, I stopped. It's like somebody had put a brake on. And I again experienced the intensity of darkness. I mean, pitch black. And then suddenly there were like tinkling bells, and a rainbow of color appeared in front of me. So this huge rainbow, and it had many colors, many more than the colors we recognize here. And then it felt like someone had turned a vacuum cleaner on me. And I found myself being reduced to about this big of a spot of color. And it was that spot of color that negotiated this rainbow back and forth until it found the color that I had become. It found that particular spot in the rainbow, and that's where I entered. And then once I entered, again, I'm moving at the speed of light. 8 is total darkness. I'm sorry, 8 is total silence. Silence that you can feel in your soul, and then you burst forth from 8 into 9, and there's music. Oh my God, is there music? Celestial music, beautiful music. And then you move through 10, and that night I moved all the way to the 16th dimension. Up until that point, I didn't know they had 16 dimensions. And then when I got there, I was taken straight to the record because I had still a tremendous amount of questions. I went back to the Akashic record. And at the time, I was very concerned about my youngest child who was born with a severe hearing problem. And I went to the record and showed that he wrote it into his plan. So there was nothing that I could do about it. And that I just needed to be patient and know that his guides and his guards understood. And of course, my biggest worry was that he would not have a social life and he may not be able to learn, the things we worry about. Of my 5 children, he's the most social. And you know why? Because he has this hearing impairment. He listens to people very intensely. And what do people want more than to be listened to? So he's the most social child I have. And he's getting ready to graduate with his master's in psychology in December. Half the things we worry about never happen. And so we have to give up this habit of worrying. So I went straight to the record and I reviewed the answers to some questions that I had. And then it was time for the return journey. Now, in the return journey, when they replayed the tape, when we got to the 2-minute silence, and Paula describes this beautifully, his voice came from the other side and thanked him very much using his first name. We thank you very much for the service that you're providing, the opportunity, etc., etc. Um, think of this, they said, as a match. When you strike a match, there's a certain amount of seconds it takes for the match, that the match will stay alight. And it's like we struck a match. They said, but you have to understand that here we don't have time, but you have time. You have timing. So in your timing, it was about the timing of a match. But since we don't have time, it was much, he would have experienced it much longer. And they thanked him and they said that when she awakens, you have to wrap her in blankets and take her outside, take her shoes off so her feet can touch the ground so she can become grounded again. And once she's grounded, bring her back and allow her to sleep, feed her a lot of water, and she's going to be fine. Eventually, I made 4 of those returns. And it was the last major thing he did in his life. Then he died of an aneurysm. But he was very clear that he particularly left it for the end of the journey. But that's what he came to do. So this is why he paid no attention to spirituality or reading spiritual books, because he was quite clear what his purpose was. Questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
Before we start doing questions, I just want to check on time. How are we with time? If we're good, because we want to be out of here by 9. I think that's when we clear out. So
Yes, you mentioned there's 16 dimensions.
That's-
You made it to
no,
16.
I made it to 16, I believe.
How many
there's
are
more.
there?
I don't know.
You
There
don't
has to
know.
be more.
Okay. So when you first had your near-death experience, which dimension did you make it to then?
I don't know. I
Okay.
didn't know. I didn't know they had dimensions then. You remember?
Okay.
I was totally ignorant.
So during the 4th, you went back 4 times. So
4
which
times.
time did you get back to the 16th dimension?
Yes.
You did. Okay.
It seems like it's home. You see, we all have a home dimension, each and every one of us. This earth is not your home. We're here on assignment. You have a home in the spiritual world. And when you leave, I saw this at the record, you appoint a spirit to take care of your interests while you're here. And that's why we go to sleep at night, so we can go check and see whether that person is doing, that spirit is doing what he or she should be doing.
Thank you.
So we have 3 dimensions here in the physical plane.
We're on the 5th now. We shifted in 2012 from
Oh.
3 to 5.
Right here.
Mhm.
Whoa. So when you go through the light, is that a dimension itself?
No, the light is low. Oh, I failed to tell you this. Thank you then. Thank you. So I can back up. Now, once I came back and I started doing all this work, you see what I'm saying? It was becoming, I was becoming overcome with it. And I was just seeking, I wasn't really doing stuff. And so they hauled me up to the 9th dimension to meet with a group there called the Group of 9. I pray you never get hauled before them. Because when you get there, they render you dumb. They don't allow you to speak. They speak, you listen. And they said, you're following all these instructions and you're trying to do clearing, etc. They said, but you're not starting any work on others. We're sending you all these relationships. Whether you term them good, bad, or indifferent, they're relationships through which you should accomplish your growth. And you are picking daisies by the wayside. We're not going to allow you to do that for much longer. And just in case you think you'll get away with it, if you don't get up and take action, we'll have to take you out of your body. Find a pregnant woman and slap you back into another body. Only this time you will be running with 2 life programs. And if you think it's hard now, think what it would be then. Boy, they woke me up real fast.
I have a question when you said that we are in the 5th dimension. I can't say I felt anything. So
You haven't seen the world change?
I can't say.
Climate change. The whole world is warring with each other. We got refugees. You see, the Bible says, Exodus, the movement of God's people. We're watching it. The only thing is, we're being judgmental about it. We're taking sides about it. But it's the movement of God's people. If we are to grow, you see, we've separated ourselves. We're Christians over here. We're Muslims over here. Muslims live in this part of the world. And when we made that shift to the fifth dimension, is a mix-up that is happening. And people from that part of the world is moving to this part of the world. And if, like me, you live close to a Hindu, you learn that what we call sacredness in Christianity is a joke. You see what I'm saying? You haven't seen it yet? Everything that is happening now is because the earth shifted. We have no choice. The fires in California, Spirit said to me, you really don't believe you live in hell? Pay attention to the fires that are burning. When they send you back here, you're taking a journey to hell. I was very clear about that when I descended.
The part that I said was I haven't felt it. I see that is going on. I'm saying I haven't felt the shift. So
I'm sure you have, but you might be preoccupied with whatever it is that's going on in your life. Because I'm staying with, I woke up this morning in a room full of books that have been written on this topic, and I was amazed. Oh my God. 50 years ago, nobody had ever heard of an NDE experience. You didn't even know what it was. Everybody is writing about it. Everywhere you turn, there are spiritual gurus. That's come about because of the shift.
that's correct. And I'm mistaken then. Because
No,
I
you see,
didn't realize it.
you may be blocked. You need to start doing some clearing.
Well, I'm in your workshop tomorrow.
Good. Then you will experience 16-dimensional light, because that's where I will be working from tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have a question? Over
Yes,
here. We
ma'am.
got 3 different ones raising their hands. How about, who was it over here?
Is there some determination already made about what's going to happen to this planet?
Of course. You think the universe has just got a planet floating here and doesn't know what's happening on it or where it's going? You wouldn't live your life that way. I wouldn't live my life my way. Do you understand what I'm saying? There are plans. We are the last people to know about the plans.
That's what I mean. I'd like to know if my grandkids are going to live their lives.
Of course they will. This earth has been turning over for how many years? Some people suggest millions. Do you believe one single individual or one set of activity is going to stop that? Of course not. You have to see, one of the things that brother had to teach me, he says, you're walking with belief systems that you think are your own. But in fact, you are walking with beliefs that has been given to you by the religion that you serve. But they don't belong to you until you own them. And the only way you will own it, you have to experience. You have to have certain experiences that will take you from believing into knowing. And when you know it, now it's yours to share with others. Because I can jump up. This was for me. I mean, I was very good at telling you the heartbeat. I got faith. But as soon as something happened, I'm staying awake all night and I'm worrying, you see. So brother said, well, when you get to that place where you're not staying awake and worrying, then you would demonstrate to me that you have learned that the universe is a lot more brilliant than you are. And that intelligence is what guides the world, not the politician. Am I making sense? Of course they are. And you know what? They will change the world faster than we can because we're stuck in our belief system. I've got 8 grandchildren. The youngest one is who's 5. And my God Almighty, I'm just praying to be able to see what she will major in. You know, she says to me and my husband, "You have no children in this house. You cannot live without children." I said, "Why?" "Well, Grandma, you have to have small children." I said, "Well, Grandma, I'm going to get these small children. All my children are grown." She said, "Grandma, there's a playground around the corner. There are lots of children there. If you take some lollipops and you're nice to them, they may even come visit you."
I have
The
a question.
generation you're talking about is infinitely more endowed with spiritual information than we have. And if you doubt me, spend some time watching the movies and the cartoons they're watching. The movies and the cartoons they're watching have a whole lot of spiritual information in there. And I'm like, wow, nobody taught me this when I was 5. Nothing to worry about. Mhm. Okay.
The question is, you mentioned that something about being put into another lifetime, another body at the same time you're in the body that you're in. So when you come back, can you do more than one life at one time, meaning 2 different lives?
Oh no, when you come back, you're just running with 2 portfolios. It's like taking two majors in a university. You're, you're silly enough to go to med school and I want to be a doctor. And right alongside, I want to be an anthropologist. And you're working on it. What happens then? You get an overload of assignments. It's the same thing when you end up with 2 lifetimes. You're running with 2 lifetimes. Your assignments are doubled, and there is expectation from spirit as to the timeline in which you would complete these things. Does that make sense? That's not a nice place to be in, believe you me. I can barely get through this one.
So this is our last question. This one.
At least this one. You take this
Which
one
one
and this
raised their hand first? Okay, so this is our last question. Okay, I'm gonna do muscle tip.
I like that.
I wondered, your intention for your experiences of going back and having another experience, was that just to ask more questions? or
No, just to
grow
get more of that light.
Ah, okay.
Because every time we travel, we absorb the light and we bring the light back. And at one point, I was complaining. I said, "How come I sit in a bus or a train and people start telling me their life story? Why is it people are telling me their trauma?" And they said, "Well, you keep going back to the light, you keep bringing back more light. You don't put light in a space where there's already light. You have to put the light so you can shine in darkness. That's why they send me on death row. It's not a darkness on death row. And when we come back, we bring this light, and we don't even have to preach. We don't have to teach. I just got to sit next to somebody. Am I making sense? Especially if you're working on yourself. In working on yourself, you're opening up yourself.
If you wouldn't mind giving her your love, then thank you very much.
I want to leave one statement with you that was given to me after I came back, when I was told should be added to the there's more to life than meets the eye. Because when I came back, I was struggling with the meaning of love. And I was given this: love is divine. God, for want of a better word, the universe is love. And love, when it hits the density of the earth, turns into light. And light is the steward of creation.